Hello friends, myself Dr. Nidhi Darbari on My Education Treasure. In my previous video on lecturing skill of micro teaching, I had discussed about the meaning, format and limitations of lecturing skill. Today, in my present video, I am going to discuss about the components of lecturing skill of micro teaching. The skill of lecturing may be defined as the art of communication that helps a teacher to say to his students as effectively as possible whenever he or she needs to stay in order to perform his teaching activities. It is an important teaching device. The first component is set induction. The skill of starting the lecture is called set induction. In set induction, the events related to the daily life of the student, the previously occurred events or historical incidents are discussed. If the start of the lecture is interesting, only then it will be able to attract the attention of the students. By stating the purpose at the beginning of the lecture, defining new terms, concepts, principles, telling the student why certain processes, techniques or formulas were used to solve problems, using relevant examples to explain major ideas, using clear and simple examples explicitly relating to new ideas to the familiar ones, reiterating definitions of new terms to help students become accustomed to them, providing occasional summaries and restatement of important ideas, using alternate explanations when necessary, slowing the word flow when ideas were complex and difficult, not digressing from the main topic, talking to the class, not to the board, making the board work organized and legible will make the set induction interesting. The following methods can be used to make the set induction of the lecturing. Use an introduction that will catch the students' interest. Raise a question to be answered by the end of the lecture. Provide a brief overview of the lecture's content either verbally with a handout or through an outline on the chalkboard. Tell students how you expect them to use the lecture material. Define or explain unfamiliar terminology. The second component of the lecturing skill is the simplicity of the language. The language of the lecture should be simple, easy and comprehensive. The capacity of expression of the teacher on the subject depends on the subject knowledge. If the language of the teacher is according to the mental level of the students, and if he bases his content on the age and experiences of the student, then the student will show interest in his lecture. The content presented should be generally accepted by students to be worth knowing. The content presented should be of importance for the group of students. The teacher ought to match the content to the student's background. The examples used need to be easily understood by students. When appropriate, a distinction should be made between factual content and opinions. Appropriate authorities should be cited to support statement. Wherever appropriate, divergent views should be presented. A sufficient amount of material should be included in the lecture. The third component is the clarity of voice. The voice of the teacher should be easily heard. The speech should be neither too formal nor too casual, and speech fillers like okay now, should not be used. Rate of speech should neither be too fast nor too slow. The teacher should establish and maintain eye contact with the class as lecture begins and should listen carefully to students' comments and questions. Facial and body movements should be consistent with teacher's intentions. He should be prepared to provide definitions for all new or technical terms and prepare examples to illustrate major ideas. He should vary speech rate, volume and pitch and use gestures and physical movements which complement verbal statements and teaching style. Looking at students while asking for what questions. The teacher should avoid using distracting gestures or movements, example grooming or pacing, adjust windows and doors for comfort. Use of audio-visual aids is the next component. The visuals should be simple, visible and large enough with wording minimal. When reproducing some text, enlarge graphics and printing. They should be easily understood, not too much detail. The teacher should practice with equipment ahead of time in classroom and set up audio-visual equipment prior to class. He should not stand and obstruct the audience view. Effective number of visuals for time allotted. Audio-visual aids should be properly timed. The teacher should put on visual materials only when he is ready to talk about them and talk to the students, not to the instructional aid. Keep aid visible until students have finished taking notes. He should come prepared with an extra bulb for overhead and slide projectors. Prior to class, the teacher should ensure that there is chalk and an eraser in the room. Repetition of teaching points. The teacher should allow for some flexibility in the amount of content to be presented in order to respond to the students' question and comments. He should determine the key points to be developed during the class session. When every nuance, detail or instance of a topic is discussed, or when too many ideas are presented and not well developed, students often lose sight of the main idea. The teacher should provide transition which shows the relationship between key ideas. He should effectively incorporate audiovisual or chalkboard, slides, transparencies, etc. The teacher needs to check students' understanding by watching the class from non-verbal cues of inattention, confusion like looking for puzzled expression, loss of eye contact, talk, clock watching, frantic note taking, etc. Change in interaction is the next component. It is essential for the skill of lecturing that the teacher invites questions so that the content taught to the students becomes clear. By changing the interaction style, the lecture can be made effective. The teacher should ask questions to see what the student knows about the lecture topic. Questions should be addressed to individual students as well as the groups at large. Using rhetorical questions, the teacher can gain students' attention. Pausing after all questions to allow students time to think of an answer. He can encourage students to answer difficult questions by providing cues or rephrasing. The teacher can ask probing questions if a student's answer was incomplete. Repeating answers when necessary so the entire class could hear can also be used by the teacher. A long pause following a question may indicate a lack of students' understanding of the question or content. If students don't answer a question, ask them to tell why. The students remain inactive or passive participants, hence the teacher uses humor to release their tension and monotony of the class. The teacher should check on students' understanding by asking students to answer specific questions. Poor examples are, any questions? Good examples are, did you have any question about the application rules in problem? Next component is speed of the lesson. While lecturing, if the students are grasping the content at the speed at which it is presented, then it is the most appropriate situation. But there are individual differences in the students. So the teacher should keep all types of students in mind while presenting the content. Organize material in some logical order. The teacher should organize material in some logical order. The suggested organizational schemes are the cause and effect. Events should be cited and explained by reference to their origin. Time sequential. Lecture ideas should be arranged chronologically. Topical. Parallel elements of different discussion topics are focused on successively. Problem solutions. The statement of a problem should be followed by alternate solution. Compare contrast. A two-sided discussion of a given topic is presented by comparing and contrasting. Ascending or descending order. Lecture topics can be arranged according to their importance, familiarity, or complexity in their ascending and descending order. Rule, example, rule. A rule is stated, followed by an example, and the rule is restated. If you found the video to be informative and interesting, I request you all to please give a like to the video to motivate me, share it with others, and subscribe it so that whenever I upload a new video, you will get a notification. The next component is establishing and maintaining contact with students. The teacher should stop after parts of the lecture and finding out if students have understood what the teacher wants them to understand. Prior to the lecture, the teacher should prepare 1 to 3 questions that he can ask at designated points in the lecture. The questions should require more than a yes or no answer. He should get responses from more than one student. Student responses can indicate the level of class understanding. The teacher should greet students with a bit of small talk. Establish eye contact with as many students as possible. Set down rules for students' participation and questioning. Use questions to gain students' attention. Encourage students' question. Speak at a rate which allows students time to take notes. Use rhetorical questions to re-engage students' attention. Ask questions which allow the teacher to gauge students' progress. See whether students was able to answer students' question satisfactorily. Note and respond to signs of puzzlement, boredom, curiosity, etc. and vary the pace of the lecture to keep students alert. And the last component is closure. Closure is indispensable in lecturing. Any lecture that is not closed does not have its full effect on the students. The main purpose of closure is to draw attention to the end of a lesson. It is the teacher's responsibility to tie all information and a great many activities that have been covered together into a meaningful whole. Closure can be provided for a lecture by briefly summarizing content and preview what lies ahead. Today I have identified 5 phases of the. Tomorrow we will see how these phases can be useful. Relating lecture material to past and future presentation. For example, during the next lesson, you will form discussion groups and get some experience applying the evaluation model discussed in class today to the first 3 case studies in file. Asking a student to summarize the lecture's key idea. Who can summarize the key issues of today's lecture? Restating what he expects the students to gain from the lecture material. As I stated in the introduction, given the appropriate data, you should be able to plot the appropriate supply and demand curves. Asking for question and answers students' question. solving or dealing with any problem raised during the lecture, restating what students were expected to gain from the content, and lastly, relating the day's lecture to upcoming presentation. Thank you very much for patiently watching the video and don't forget to subscribe.